Hey friends, this is Karen from Blue Rooster Farm, and today we are starting off in the kitchen. And in the kitchen, I am going to be making a vintage cookie that I think you will just absolutely love. It's easy to make and it is really yummy. Then we're going to go outside and I'm going to share with you what's going on in the garden and on the farm and let you see how our garden is growing. So if you want to see how to make these special cookies and you want to see what's going on at the farm, stick around. Thanks for sticking around. Well, the first thing we're going to be doing is we're going to be making this cookie that I was telling you about in the intro. And some of you may know this cookie as a no-bake cookie. But when I was in elementary school, on the menu, they were called dream cookies. And anytime dream cookies was on the menu for our school lunch, everybody was buying lunch that day. And I don't know whether your school lunch had them or if they called them dream cookies or no bake cookies. In Missouri, in southern Missouri, they were called dream cookies. And I'm not sure why. They must taste like a dream. So this is a really simple recipe to make. You don't have to bake it. It's all done on the stove top and they are really yummy. Now you can make these without the cocoa or you can make them with the cocoa. They're chocolate dream cookies with the cocoa and they're peanut butter dream cookies without the cocoa. And I like them both ways, but the traditional way at school was always with the cocoa. So I'm going to turn you around here to the stove and we're going to start cooking. Well, before we start making these dream cookies, I want to share with you the book that I got this recipe from. And I've been making these since the 90s, probably before that too. But we never really had the recipe from the school until I got this cookbook when I was teaching elementary school in Springfield, Missouri. And that would have been the early 90s. But this cookbook is a compilation of recipes that were submitted by people who worked in the food service. It says compiled by R12 School Food Service Associations of Springfield Public Schools. And this recipe is the recipe that the school would use, but it's cut down to a family version. And so it is chocolate no bake cookies slash dream cookies. So let's get started. The first thing you're going to need to do is take 1 stick of butter, which is a half a cup of butter, and we're going to put it in a pot. Now you're going to be adding several things, so you need to have a decent sized pot. A saucepan would probably be too small. So I just have a small Dutch oven here, not a huge one, but big enough for this recipe. Now I'm just going to get this started melting. And while that is melting, I am going to add half a cup of cocoa, 2 cups of white sugar. And before I add anything else, I'm just going to stir this together. Now, if you are using a thinner pan, this is a cast iron, enamel coated cast iron, so it's a heavy pan. But if you're using a thinner one, be careful. This can scorch really easily. I know that when we were younger making these, it would scorch quite often and we'd have to throw a batch out. You don't want that to happen. So this is just cocoa, sugar, and butter. Now let's loosen that up just a little bit with a half a cup of milk. I usually like to put my sugar and my cocoa together because sometimes the cocoa wants to kind of clump and is kind of dry lumps. It just takes a little bit to stir those out. If you get the sugar and the cocoa together, it seems to smooth that cocoa out just a little bit. Now we're going to heat this up to a boil. And once it comes to a boil, we are going to cook it and let it simmer for 2 minutes. Or actually, we want it to boil pretty heavy for 2 minutes. And that means we're going to have to stir it constantly at that time. And again, right now, if you have a thin pan, you're going to need to be stirring, especially in those corners and around the edges, because that's where it likes to scorch. So I'm going to let this come to a boil, and then I'll bring you back. Okay, I'm just bringing you back here, and it's starting to simmer around the edges, but we don't start timing until this is at a full boil. And so just keep stirring, just like this. And again, you can see it coming up to a boil right around the edges. And right there in those corners is where it can start scorching. So keep scraping that so that it does not burn. It's about ready to turn to a boil, but I'm just going to bring you back when it starts boiling. It is getting close. When I stop stirring it, it starts bubbling a little more around the edges, and we're just about ready to start timing it. We're going to get it a nice full rolling boil. Now, if you don't cook it long enough, your cookies probably will not set up. So this is important that you follow the directions on your cooking time. It's just about boiling all the way through. Let's see what happens here. Okay, so I'm going to start 2 minutes on my timer. And we're going to cook this for 2 minutes. I'll bring you back after 2 minutes are up. Our 2 minutes is just about up, and I just want to remind everybody that this is very hot, and if you get it on your skin, it will stick and it will burn. This is boiling sugar, and it gets to a lot higher temperature than boiling water. So just be careful not to get it on you. And there is our alarm. So we're going to turn off our heat. And I'm going to keep stirring it for just a second so it doesn't scorch while it's coming down from the boil. And now we're going to add a half a cup of peanut butter. Now I'm using chunky. You can use whatever kind you want. And this is also our homemade peanut butter. And so I'm going to add a pinch of salt with it as well, just because we don't add additional salt to our peanut butter usually. And you can add some salt to yours if you want, but it's just optional. And that's about a half a teaspoon. Then I'm going to get that mixed in. It will melt really nicely. And if you want to know how I make our peanut butter, I have a video on that. And if you just go to Blue Rooster's channel page, you can find it. So that is melting down. Now we're going to be adding 2 cups of oats. Now the recipe calls for 2 cups of quick oats, and whenever we make it, we always use just the old-fashioned oats. The quick oats will soak it up a little easier, but we just prefer the old-fashioned oats. So you can use whichever you like. Now I will tell you that I often use a lot more oats, but since I'm following this recipe, we're going to do it like it says. I just get more oats and less of the sugar just to try to make it a little more beneficial. But that's stirred in. Now we're also going to stir in about a teaspoon of vanilla. And this is just my homemade vanilla. And you can also find a video on how to make that on my channel. And we're just going to stir it in. Now I'm going to move this over to the counter so we can scoop it out onto some sheets, and I'll just move the camera over there. All right, so what I have here is our cookies that I've just removed from the stove, And I have just buttered these silicone mats, and I think that will make it just fine. Now you can just take a regular spoon and you can just put a teaspoon or so on your mat or your wax paper, aluminum foil, whatever you're putting it on, and do it like this. But I really like to use a little scoop. And if you have a bigger one, just don't fill it all the way to the top. And I just like to put it out like that, and then they'll flatten out. Just scoop it and get them all nicely laid out on the mat. And you do need to work fairly quickly, especially if it's cold, because if this cools down, it does become hard to scoop out. It kind of becomes grainy. They're still delicious, but they might not look quite as pretty. And it makes a nice batch. Now, one thing that we used to do every once in a while was we would butter a little 9 by 13 a glass baking dish, and just pour this in it. And then when they were just about firm, we would cut them into squares, and they would be more like a bar cookie. And that worked too, but we've always enjoyed the cookies the most. So I am going to get all of these on here, and then we're going to let them cool down. And it doesn't take very long to cool down, especially if you have boiled them the appropriate amount of time. If they continue to be soft even after cooled, sometimes you just need to let them set out for just a bit. And if they continue after that, you can put them in the refrigerator and you can eat them cold. And that would just be that there was too much moisture in the batter, or you didn't boil it long enough, or maybe it was a rainy day and they just didn't set up. So I'm going to go ahead and finish these up, and then I'll bring you back when they're cooled off and we'll taste them. They look delicious. So while our cookies are cooling on our silicone mats, let's talk a little bit about the garden. So a couple of weeks ago at the end of March, we started planting in our garden. Now, I took the video camera out while Andy was putting seeds in, and we just kind of did a short little video of how we planted and what our garden looked like. And then yesterday I went out with the video camera and I took pictures of what the garden looks like now, and also did a little walk around the farm and took pictures of the beautiful fruit trees and all of the green grass and the bulbs that are blooming, and also a little sneak peek at our sheep with their lambs and just what it's like right now on the farm. It's just a beautiful time. The grass is green, the air smells beautiful, and all the birds are chirping and singing. So I hope you enjoy this second part. After we're through, I'll bring you back and we'll taste test these cookies.
Hey everyone, it is the first planting in the garden day on Blue Rooster Farm. It is March 29th, 2025, and we're going to start putting some seeds in the garden. Today is a beautiful day. It is warm, reaching almost 80, which is totally out of character for the end of March, but it's perfect day to get some seeds planted. And so we have been pulling out some of the seeds that we recently purchased and looking at what we're going to be planting. So the first thing we're going to be planting is some carrots. And we don't normally plant carrots. We didn't have a whole lot of luck earlier when we first started our garden, probably 20 years ago, and just haven't ever tried much again. But this year we're going to give it a try. And so I've got two kinds of seeds here. And we have heard that if you plant the carrot seeds earlier, that you have a better chance of having a good harvest. So this is the time we're going to plant them. And the two kinds that I have are Fairy's Best Nantes, and also I have Danvers. And these are, I guess, kind of pelletized. They have a clay coating on them, which makes it easier for you to handle them and easier for you to sow and see. Um, they're very, very small seeds. And what we're going to be using to plant these seeds is this little gadget right here. And this is Earthway seed planter. And we've had this probably for 4 or 5 years now. And it is really handy, especially if you have a pretty big garden. And there are several discs that you have that come with it, and each one is for certain kinds of seeds. And on the disc, it tells you what seeds will work with that disc. And it's all based on the size of them. And the one that we have right here is probably for carrots. You can see there's a little tiny little cup on the end of each of these blades. They're not really blades, but discs. And those are the ones that scoop up the seed from the carriage and drop it into the ground. So that is the one we'll start off using. And then the seed cups get bigger. Looks like this is radishes, asparagus seeds, things like that. This one is even larger. Okra, chard, beets. And you can see the cups get a little bigger, and they're spaced the right distance too. And this is actually for peas, and you can see how closely those are spaced. So that's interesting that they get closer spaced as well. We have beans, and this one right here looks like corn. Yep, sweet corn. So you can see how they space and how they are sized for the seeds. So it's kind of a handy little gadget, and it doesn't weigh much at all and just really simple to use. So let's put this up on the bench here, and I'm going to let Andy explain how you put these in.
Okay, you just set the plates in there up against, there's a little hub on there, and you just rotate it clockwise, and that locks it in place. You can see the little tab down there on the white part there, and then you see how that moves, and that scooping, those little scoops grab a seed every revolution, and then they'll space them out appropriately. And then your depth of planting is that shoe right there. You can adjust that from, if you're doing lettuce, you'd have it at basically 0 and just let the chain drag on it, versus corn might be 1.5 inches or 2 inches, something like that on it. It's completely adjustable, and it does have a metric and standard measurements on it. Okay, and the little chain there is just drags along behind it after the seed's placed, and just helps to do a little covering. Doesn't do a lot, but especially if you have it set real shallow, it'll put a little bit of dirt on for like your lettuce seeds or something like that.
Okay, here's the garden. Andy, can you tell us what you've done so far this spring?
Yeah, if you remember last fall, we put compost on and we tilled that in. And then the beds that are going to have the finer stuff in, finer seeds, lettuce and carrots and things like that, went ahead and tilled them up again and got them ready for planting. And the earlier planting things, we'll probably go corn on that big bed right there, actually. We won't plant the corn until probably about mid-April here. But this upper bed, we're going to go with our smaller seeded plants like our lettuce, our carrots, and things like that. And you can see the high organic matter. It's really got a nice texture to it. You can work it really easily with a hoe, and um, makes for good seed bed prep and easy seed bed prep.
And share with the viewers who haven't been watching very long what you put on the garden for compost.
Yeah, what we do is we clean out the sheep barn in the about this time of year actually, and then I'll turn that about every 30 days. Turn it, I mean, with the bucket of the tractor. I'll keep moving it around, so introduce more oxygen and everything, and it'll come out to be like coffee grounds really at the end by the like October or so in the fall, and then we'll add it again. We'll add that to the beds and till that in and let it mellow out over the winter.
And we do have a video, I think it's the fall garden, putting the garden to bed video showing him turning the compost and adding it to the beds. So while Andy's getting that cedar uh, ready, I'm just showing you here the garden, and here's our strawberry patch. We were a little concerned because last summer was really dry and hot at the end of the year, and we didn't know how these strawberries were going to pull through, and they actually look pretty good. They were just planted last spring, so this will be our first year that we'll be picking from them. And then these three beds down here, you haven't tilled those this spring yet, right?
Correct.
Okay. And you can see the straw we have here, and that's going to be put on top of the plants or the beds after we plant the plants and things. That will be our mulch. So here we are. Go ahead and tell us what we're getting ready to do here.
Yeah, that's our seed there. That's a carrot seed, so there's not very much of it, and it's very small. But it's down there, and we've got the right disc in there for that type of seed. You can set your row spacing with an arm that pivots right or left, depending on where you're marking, and it's got a little flag on it that's adjustable. So you can, for carrots or lettuce, you'll have it pretty close together. If you want doing like sweet corn, it may be 30 inches away from so you're making 30-inch rows. But that'll just mark your next row. If you see that, it just scratches a little line in the soil, so you don't have to string ropes to get straight rows or anything like that.
So Andy just did one pass there, and we usually do probably two passes. Is that right?
Yeah,
Just
especially with a smaller seed.
and that way we can always thin them down, and you're more likely to get a good stand.
And here we're getting ready. I'm planting a second type of carrot, and so going again dump that's a very little seed, but we're going to dump that in the hopper, and then we'll go down that line that we marked in our with our first pass. So we've got our spacing right between our rows.
So the next thing we're planting is some bunching onions. And I've never planted these bunching onions before, but it takes a different disc. So Andy's changed that out. He's put the seeds in, and now he is going to put them just a little bit next to the carrots because all of these things are not that big when they grow and they don't need that much space. And the final row in this area, we're just going to put a lettuce blend. And so in this bed, we ended up with 2 carrot rows, 2 onion rows, and a lettuce row. And here Andy is going to put some spinach seed in the part of the garden that he hasn't yet tilled this spring, and it'll be fine. He's going to put Olympia and Bloomsdale. We're going to have a row of each. Now we're moving over to the east garden, and here Andy is planting something, but I'm going to let him explain to you what kind of setup he has here.
Okay, so I'm planting. We usually plant onion sets, and I've pulled a string across so I can keep fairly straight row there. Um, and I'm just pushing these onions. I'm not digging a furrow or anything. I'm just the soil's mellow enough. I'm just pushing these onions in to plant them, each one, and probably 2 or 3 finger widths apart because we can always pull some for green onions. Um, and then if you see, I'm on the mat there. That's just several floor mats from that I'll use in the shop. But I wanted something to keep my kind of disperse my weight, so I'm not causing a lot of compaction in the beds. And if you noticed on the other planting ones, I try not to walk on the beds once we have them prepped and everything to keep from doing a lot of compaction. But you can see how I'm just pushing the onions in there, and then I'll come back and later on mulch between them.
How many onion sets do you think you planted?
We ended up with 4 rows, and there's over 100 per row, so somewhere in 110 to 120 per row, something like that.
And we like to plant a lot of onions because we use them throughout the year. When I can and stuff for salsas and things and spaghettis, we use a lot of onions. And then we'll dry them or hang them in the basement and just use them fresh like that for a while. And then once they start sprouting or get ready to sprout, I'll start chopping them up and putting them in Ziploc bags and putting them in the freezer. That way I can just go out and get a bag of chopped onions to add to any recipe or anything that I'm making.
Okay, we started out with 4 different bundles, and then I ended up having room. I went back to the greenhouse and bought 2 or 3 more bundles. And we usually plant 3 or 4 different types of onions, as you can see there. Karen's showing you the different ones we have this year.
We're coming over to our garden, and Andy has been working really hard on it after work and on the weekends, and it's looking really good. So he's got a few projects lined up out here. He's decided, we used to have some grass here and we would just mow it right in here and right over here. And so he's decided to go ahead and bring in some dirt and fill that in so that we can have another mound of garden there and over there. This right here, he's mulched with grass clippings. This is our lettuce and carrots. I think there might be something else in there, but I can't remember what it is. But it's all starting to sprout. You can see the lettuce. Right there, coming up in the rows. The carrots are a little harder to find right now. It's still early, and they do take a little bit more time coming up. Over here, let's see. I don't know. It looks like he's planted something. Let me think of what he just came out here. Oh, he put corn in this one. We've got our sweet corn, at least a first batch of it, planted. And this is the middle of April right now. And we're in northeast Missouri. Then we have our garlic growing right over here. And we planted this last fall. I think it was November. And it looks like it's coming up well. We've never done garlic like this before, so we're anxious to see if we get a decent sized clove and see if that works. Our strawberry plants that we started last year look like they are coming out nicely. We've got some blooms starting to put on. Some of the plants are just waking up. Different varieties in there. So it'll be fun to see if we get some berries this year. Let's see, over here we have spinach. We planted our spinach earlier, and we've just got some grass clippings in between for weed control. You can see the spinach on both sides of that clipping. And then I think we're still waiting for things to put in this garden and in this one here too. So there is one side of our garden, and it's looking really good. Andy's got it mulched between the rows. We don't like to weed, and so we use the mulch to help control the weeds. Let's go over to the other garden. So we were right over there at that garden over there, and now we're on this side here. And Andy's got this one worked up really nicely. Right here, I usually plant zinnias, sunflowers, a few easy to grow flowers. So he's got it worked up ready for me to plant there. We have a big gooseberry bush right here, and it's just taking over. The white electric fence is used to keep basically our dog out. We have one dog that likes to dig, and so we don't want him in there. One dog is fine, but our new dog, he's just a little over a year old, loves to dig, so we keep him out. It is also good for raccoons and things once the corn gets ripened, and
it's not good for, this size fencing is not good for rabbits. This one is actually for sheep, and we just used what we had since we have sheep. And I think he's got these just ready to plant. Up here we have our onions, and he's planted those a couple of weeks ago, and they're looking really good. Several rows because we go through a lot of onions. We store them and freeze them. And we make lots of products that use onions, like our salsas and stuff like that. And then this is just all set to also plant. And I think he's going to bring in a load of dirt over here too and make that a bed. And here is the dog that we should have called Digger. Gus. Hey, Gus.
I hope you enjoyed the spring tour outside. I know I had a lot of viewers asking to see what it was like outside and to see the sheep and to see the garden. So I hope you enjoyed that. Well, now the cookies are ready to taste. So let me just lift one up here. They are solidified or they've hardened. So let's just take one. And as you can see, it is hard. Mm, so good. Now, if you wanted to make this just peanut butter, just leave out the cocoa and make them the same way, and they are really good that way too. But you can't beat chocolate. Mm. Well, I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, please consider subscribing. I would really appreciate that. Our channel has grown to about 14,000 now, and we are so excited. We really appreciate all of our viewers. Also, don't forget to like and share, and I hope to see you back here next time. Thanks for watching, and have a great week.